All right, hello, welcome to our Sprint 1 presentation. My name is Vaughn Berger,
And my name is Montgomery Russell.
and we are starting with our SPMP and our documentation. Okay, so this is a brief table of contents, still a work in progress. So our project overview, we are, like everyone else, making an accounting software. We have all these numbers of sprints and our deliverables. Each deliverable will consist of three elements. It'll be the actual application itself, the user documentation, which we're reviewing right now, and the video. So our SPMP will be updated as the project goes on. We have a number of large acronyms here. The SRS is the software requirement specification, which outlines all the requirements for the software. The SDD is the software design document, which goes over the specific architecture of our application. Then STP is the software test plan. This will deal with all of our testing requirements for our application. Our process model uses Agile. We're developing for 5 sprints. 80% of each sprint will be dedicated to implementing the actual requirements. 20% will be dedicated to testing. We have several project stages. The first stage is project initiation, which is already concluded. This is planning out the requirements and the design and the like. The next stage after that is the product development stage, and this consists of the 5 major sprints. Sprint 1, obviously the one we are working on currently, and then all of the future ones. After product development comes the product release. Towards the end, that will be where the bulk of our testing and our final deliverable will be, and then after that, product termination, after we've successfully delivered the product. Our organizational structure, we are students in the software application domain class. We are working under the instructor Ermias Mamo. Our project manager is Caroline Robinson. So for the responsibilities, as mentioned, Caroline is our project manager, but she's also our technical, right? She handles the documentation. I am the technical lead and the backend developer, so I handle the backend and API as well as coordinating the other coders. Montgomery is our front end developer, and Trevor Caffrey is our database developer. Our managerial process is pretty set in stone. We have zero budget. We are all students here. But it is flexible. We could spend more if we need to host specific resources. Our schedule is constrained. We have deadlines, but we can go over for some of those requirements when needed, but our scope is completely fixed. So, assumptions, dependencies, and constraints. Our assumptions are that our scope, budget, and schedule will be pretty much consistent throughout the entirety of the project. Dependencies, we depend on a handful of external third-party systems in order to host things like our API and our database. Right now we're using Heroku for the API hosting. Constraints, we have a lot of constraints due to the online nature of most of our team. We meet in Discord, which is primarily text-based. We have zero budget, and we're students, so that is a large blocker to our progress. Our schedule is also very tight and constrained. We must complete it by the end of the semester. Risk management, time miscalculation. This is if we underestimate how long certain requirements will take to fulfill. Its priority is very high. Team miscommunication, due to our online nature of just communicating through text and the occasional Teams call, we may misunderstand or miscommunicate some of the requirements to each other, leading to a decrease in efficiency and coordination. And then skill failure. Some of our team members may not have all the required skills to perform the functions of their role. So, all right. The project support functions, this is how often we report in. As you can see, we have a table detailing what kinds of roles need to report on what and how often. This is all reported in through our Discord server. The project monitoring will be done through Trello boards. We will show a little bit of that later. Staffing approach. We were picked by the professor into this group, so that is straightforward. The technical process, we have version control. We're using GitHub to manage the versions of the software. Programming languages, we have for the front end, we have HTML and CSS as well as JavaScript. The back end consists of Python using Fast API, and the database is using MySQL with, again, Python to access it. Software documentation, we have the software requirement specification and the software design document, as well as the STP. However, we have that will be implemented much later, as well as the user manuals. The user manuals be written during the last sprint, so it is not super in our focus at this moment. So this is a table that goes over our work packages. This is a large scale look at each of the most primary, like, discrete objectives for this sprint. So is the individual documentation as well, setting up the database and the login and all of the requirements found in the SRS. This is a diagram of our project and the sprints and some of those requirements, it looks like. Yeah, that concludes our SPMP.
So, I'm going to take it from Vaughn and we're going to talk about the SDD, the software design document. So, essentially covers a lot of the same things that the SPMP covers: constraints, the assumptions, dependencies. It covers a lot of the forefronts of that nature, especially some of the architectural strategies that we use, just depending on like the programming languages and databases and other libraries that we might end up using, or communication mechanisms, or the way we distribute data. This also is taking into effect of what type of architecture we are using. So the front end is using like HTML, JavaScript, and the back end is using Fast API for the API calls, and Python, and the database is SQL or MySQL more so. And we're just talking about how to run this all natively inside of a web browser, to have a functional accounting app that is requested from our client, or in this case, the professor. Some of the screen mock-ups actually for the early appearance actually show up here, and they're just some of the simpler ones just to show general outline, which we will be showing the code in a minute. Just a couple of the code verifications, account recovery, some of the generic ones, more so like that, the user dashboard, admin menu, account recovery or creation, and other things of that nature. Just some of these more simplistic designs that we were just really trying to get down and figured exactly what we were wanting. Here is the database design, and this is really how the database is set up based off of the requirements given to us by the professor, but also how it works for us and how we've gotten it to work with our API calls and everything else in between. And most of it's just regarding that, the interface, exports, and constraints, and all that good stuff. And it's very similar to covering some of the topics over on the SRS. So this SRS is not complete, it's still a work in progress. But as it sits, we have mostly functional requirements, just running over what things that we had to have versus what we wanted to have, and just things that absolutely had to function and had a purpose to do. And this just basically covers most of those. We have not added many non-functional requirements because we have not gotten to that part in the project to where we could really worry about the non-functional requirements. And besides documentation, that's going to basically wrap it up besides our Trello. Now I'm going to hand that right back to Vaughn for this.
All right, so we have two main Trello boards. Let's go into the primary one, software engineering, 4713. All right, so this is our primary Trello board for tracking the requirements tasks. This is taken directly from the sprint one. We have divided up the list of 20 or so requirements into front end, back end, and database. We have had some issues with the API, so many of these requirements are implemented on one or both ends, but we don't have them interacting with each other. So unfortunately, in time for sprint run, we have not completed all 20 of the requirements. Next, we've got the bug ticket tracker. We have reported some bugs here. I imagine as we continue to complete the requirements for sprint one and onwards, this will begin to fill up with more bugs and resolved issues. But at the moment, it is a little bare. This is my API that is set up for our back end. This is how the front end will communicate with the database. It will send API requests through get, posts, and puts. There is a delete, however, it is currently not implemented. Each of these allows the front end to send a JSON file with the request, which will allow the backend to process the data and make changes to the database.
All right, and with that finally being capped and covered with, we're going to start with the project. Now, this is going to cover mostly the login screen and all the login functionality. So, let's say I needed to make an account to do so. So, we're going to go and use a Sarah. And we're going to call her Sarah Jones. She lives at 123 Street. And her email is sj@yahoo.com. 0202 1990. Sounds about right. And we're going to pick a password. All right. So, if we hit submit, well, we have successfully made an account. And we can go ahead and hit back. Now, that says it's pending. So we actually have to come in here to the admin portion and come look at the pending roster. Now, sometimes we have this issue. Oh, there she goes. Okay, so it just hasn't reacted.
A little bit of a work in progress.
It's a little bit of work in progress. Sometimes it doesn't instantaneously load because we are making a API call over the internet to a separate host device, and then we're trying to retrieve that same information back. It's not exactly the fastest for quick turnarounds. So I can go ahead and hit approve all. And if we come in here to the user rosters, again, it's not the most instantaneous thing. There it is. You just have to kind of play with it. We have to set up some delays to make sure it loads all the way in. But besides that, it works. So we can also shoot emails. Now, we did have this email working earlier, but we ran into...
We're experiencing a few issues with the API.
Exactly. The API is going through constant changes because we are trying to grow and make different functionality. And so, I'll come in here and I'll say hello, and nothing happens. It'll usually error out in my IDE, but that's okay. So as far as that goes, not the end of the world. And in here, I can make another user, but this time I don't have to do the pending process. It automatically fills out, but it's the same process. And if you've noticed in every screen, there's been a logout button for everybody. And if you hit logout, you go back home. Now, let's say that I'm Sarah, and I don't remember my password. Don't remember none of it. Right, so if I click here, I remember my username, which was just Sarah, and it was Sarah Jones, and it was 0290 because boom. Now I gotta remember what's what color? What's my favorite red color? Is it red? No, it tells you to try again because it's not right. So this time it'll give you a chance. You can say it's green. Huh, you got it right. So if I hit OK, brings me to the password screen. From here, I get to change password. Now I can hide this. So if I could say hi, or just say password, I guess I got to do this. So if I do something like this, and I can show and hide it, I'll take off those ones just to show that it's a requirement to have those passwords don't match because I have an uppercase and a lowercase. Just to show they don't match. You also I'm missing a character. I need a 1. And it's still less than 8 because if I hit here and go 2, it won't load because I'm still more than 8. So it tells you what's wrong. If you hit submit, you have a new password. And if I'm going to go and log in, I go here. And if I hit sign in, it brings me to the employee dashboard. Now with the employee dashboard, I have these list of functions. Although they're not fully fleshed out just yet, they are a work in progress. The send email would generally work, except we're having the same issue because it's based off the same API. And I even have a current time clock, but it's essentially the same setup, same system, and we can just log out, and that'll be it. So, with that covering all of that basis, Vaughn, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that covers everything.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us, and hope to see you next time.